Hello and welcome to the oh my god, it's a good thing there's such thing as editing.
Yep.
Welcome to the short bites podcast episode 2, where we talk about Stephen King's short fiction. Today I have two booktubers that everyone listening probably knows about, and if you don't, seriously, go to the show notes and subscribe to their channels. With me today is Jen, Literary Love. Hello, how are you doing?
I'm doing fine. How are you?
Oh, I'm great. I'm great. And Sin, people from the Weird Reads podcast might recognize Sin as well because we talked about the Dark Tower series, didn't
You
we?
sure did. Yes.
Yeah.
What a journey.
How are you doing, Sin?
Doing all right.
Awesome. And Michael, you're back for two
I
episodes
am.
in a row.
I'm back in black, or kind of gray.
Yeah, kind of gray, a little gray. There's
Yeah.
black in there though, so that's okay. And anyone who may have forgotten, Michael used to co-host the Darkness Dwells podcast with me. So welcome again, Michael.
Thank you.
How
It's
you
good
doing?
to be back in some respect.
Yeah. All right. So today we are discussing the short story. We are at the very beginning here of this what's going to be probably, if I continue it to its end, this is going to be a very long journey. And this is the very, very beginning, because today we're talking about Jerusalem's Lot. It was released. It was first published in 1978. It was original to the collection Night Shift. And that's pretty awesome. So before we get into anything, I just want to break the ice a little bit, maybe get the audience to know everyone's voices for the podcast, or excuse me, or just to liven things up a little bit, because things are quite dreary in the world right now, as we were talking about just before hitting live. So how about we get into some promo here? Sin, would you like to tell us what you're doing that you would like people to know about, and where people can find you?
You can find me on YouTube at Sin's Book Nook, and I'm on Blue Sky too. I feel like more people should use Blue Sky because there's a huge book community there, and it's nice. It's
Yeah,
nicer
I
than
got to
any of the other social media platforms. It's just
I got
simply Sin.
I got to use Blue Sky more. I want to get into that Blue Sky book community.
But yeah, I mainly talk about horror with some fantasy and paranormal nonfiction and some fiction. I know a lot of people think that like when I say paranormal, go to straight to like the romance, but no, I'm more into, like weird cryptids and ghosts and strange happenings and the Bermuda Triangle and what have you. So, bookish things and weird stuff. That's kind of my tagline.
Yeah, I've been watching you for quite a few years now, and it's always a lot of fun watching your videos.
Oh, thanks.
And Jen, uh, tell us about yourself and your YouTube channel, and anything else you want to plug.
All right. I'm Jen. You can find me on YouTube, Instagram, Threads, and I'm new to Blue Sky, but you can find me under Literary Love 123 on each of those platforms. And I like to combine my master's in English with my passion for the horror genre to talk about the books that I read. Some of my favorites areas would be in feminist theory, good for her literature, the gothic, and Stephen King, of course. My master's thesis was actually written on 4 of Stephen King's characters. I wrote about intergenerational connection in the characters of Beverly Marsh, Carrie White, Dolores Claiborne, and Jesse Burlingame. So
Nice.
I am excited to
Very
be
cool.
here and talk about Stephen King.
I would love to read that.
Yeah, me too. Honestly,
I can send that to you if you would like
I do.
to.
yeah.
I do.
Could you send that to me too? Because I would love to read
Sure
that.
can.
Can I get in on this? I can
Absolutely. Yeah.
I think I sent an email to everyone in a group, so you should be able to find everyone's email fairly easily. Michael, what would you like to plug about yourself?
Well, I'm still going to plug my novel that's 5 years old. Well, you can find me on michaelschutzfiction.com, and you'll see my books and my stories and some interviews, and I think some episodes of our Old Darkness Dwells podcast.
Yeah.
And currently, I'm working on my new novel, and I want to put out a collection of short stories soon, whatever soon might be.
I hear you on that. It's
So
expensive.
compared to last episode, I've ditched that novella because I talked about that.
Yeah,
on
you
the
did.
show.
Yeah. All right. So, like last week, I'm going to ask some new guest questions regarding Stephen King. I did this with Michael. I have like a good 9 or 10, and our first episode goes through all those questions, but it took like over an hour to answer all of them. And since we have 2 guests, I decided to go with just 4. And, just for time, circumstances and whatnot. So, we will start with, I know your origin story a little bit, Sin. Your first book, I know, was Salem's Lot. Is that correct?
Yes, it was. And I
how-
just reread it.
Yeah. How long ago was it when you read that? Did you come to
Oh
King
my-
young or early?
I was
Or
probably
late, I
like,
mean.
no, I was probably 12 or 13. I read horror really, really young. Like I went to the library and I was digging into Stephen King, Christopher Pike, R.L. Stein,
Oh, nice.
and
yeah.
then a little bit of Anne Rice here and there.
Do you remember what you first thought of that? Like, did it change your world at all? Or are you just like, that was freaky, and then move on to the next book?
I don't know if it changed my world. I really liked it because it was vampires, and I loved vampires
Yeah.
at that point in time. And it was crazy rereading it, like literally like a week ago, because it's still so freaking good.
Mhm.
I didn't remember any of it.
Yeah.
Like it was like reading a whole new book. Obviously I remember there was vampires and stuff, but yeah, it's still great.
Awesome. Jen, what is your Stephen King origin story? How were you first introduced to this writer?
I was 14. I was at a party with my friends, and we watched the movie Pet Cemetery. And that was the original 89, because I'm old. And so we watched that. And my best friend was like, "Oh, did you like that movie? My mom has all the books, that movie's based on. She has all the books that Stephen King wrote, because that was back when he used to be like a club or something, and you could get all of his books." And so I was like, "Really?" So when I got to our house, her mom had like this entire room devoted to like all these books of Stephen King's.
Oh, wow.
So I got Pet Cemetery, and that's the first one I read, and I was hooked. I mean, after that, I think Christine was next for me. Then Salem's Lot, which is still one of my favorites. I reread it recently too, Sin, so it's funny you mentioned that. But yeah, I first came to him through movies, but once I got to his books, never looked back.
What's funny is I reread it too last year, the second half of last year. I think it was October. I read it for the month of October. I remember that because it was like close to Halloween, and I made it a thing,
Yeah.
And yeah, I really enjoyed it too. And Michael, we discussed yours, but I'm curious, how many Stephen Kings do you know? How many Stephen King books you've read?
All of them.
You've read all of them. Wow.
Except for Later, Holly.
Oh, that's a good one.
That's it.
What about
Holly's
You Like It
pretty
Darker?
good.
Did you finish?
I'm working my way through that. I'm not liking it very much.
Oh, yeah?
I'm not.
Tisk. Just joking.
Oh, no.
There's no judgment here. There's no judgment.
One of my
here.
favorite short stories comes out of that book. It's
Same.
gonna be my
Yeah,
my
yeah.
It's not, which
answer to-
story is it? Because I'll read that
Uh,
one.
I'm skipping ahead of one of the questions though. Okay, the Danny Coughlin's Bad Dream. That was
Okay.
I really like that one.
That was Michael and I, we discussed this last week.
Well, you're gonna hear the first episode sometime. So I couldn't finish that story. I loved it, but once it got into so much detective thriller that I still want to know what happened to Jalbert or Jalbert.
Jalbert, yeah.
I think is kind of a play on Jailbird. I don't know.
Maybe, yeah.
But I'm going to finish it. It was good. But, I read John Sanford for detective stories, not King.
You see, I'm very elaborate at getting back at people because, Michael and I, we were talking quite a few months ago about him not liking this collection. And I was like, you know what? I'm going to start a new podcast and get people who love this freaking collection, and we're going to gang up on
a
him.
long time until we talk to that book.
Yeah.
So we're here now. No, I'm joking. No, I'm joking. Like I said, no judgment. But yeah, that's actually a good thing. I like it that you like it darker, or at least that short story, because it gives a different perspective.
Mm-hmm.
And
because Willie the Weirdo was excellent. I like the smaller ones. It's just was the two bastards or whatever that.
I like that one about
Two talented bastards. Yeah.
That one I liked.
Yeah.
I'm
All right,
being shunned by my fellow Stephen King lovers. I don't like this book. But yes, I've read everything.
Nice.
I have Cycle of the Werewolf. I think I've paged through it, but not really read it. But yeah.
Okay, so not quite everything, but almost.
Well, damn near 2 things, and you're gonna say
That's amazing, because I haven't read anywhere near all of them.
Yeah,
that was the best thing. That's the best thing about coming to King in any sort of later fashion. Is there's such a backlog.
Yeah, there is.
And
huge.
what other author has written probably 60 novels in all these collections? Every single one is still in print.
Yep.
Yeah.
Oh, except
That's
for Rage.
amazing.
but
Right,
he-
I was gonna
he
say
pulled that
Rage.
himself.
Rage. Yeah. I forgot about that one.
He pulled that himself, though. But yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, I've read about 55, I think. You can get like a list on the internet because people track these things, and I didn't know that until recently. And so, of course, I went and got one, and I
Mhm.
scratched off all the books I've read, and it turned out to be about 55.
Nice.
Yeah. So, I want to finish, though. I want to read them all. Do you, Jen? Do you have aspirations to finish Stephen King's backlog at all?
I do, yes. I definitely want to. I hate to even think about it, though, but I'm in the back of my mind, I'm like, he's not getting any younger, and
yeah,
whew, enough is happening in 2025. I'm not even going there.
Yeah,
David Lynch passed away, and he was my favorite director.
Yeah.
I mean, he was a genius. That
was sad.
Mhm.
And Sin, do you aspire, Sin, to finish his backlog? It's okay if you don't. Like it's a.
Oh,
it's
I
a
do,
lot of work.
but
Yeah?
it's gonna be a while. I mean, I'm not gonna just. I do plan to read The Stand next. That's where I'm going next in my Stephen King. I'm doing stuff that's like been heavily mentioned in The Dark Tower right now. So
I take it that you haven't read The Stand yet.
Nope.
Okay, you're in for a treat, man. Especially that first half. The first half is just like, oh my god, it's so good. Yeah. I can't wait to hear what you think of that. The second half is up for grabs. I think it's just it depends on you as a person.
I've read the first half of that more than I've reread the whole book.
Yeah, you know what? Me too. I've reread it like 2 or 3 times, but I always stop around the halfway mark.
Yeah.
I've done that with Clive Barker's Magica because that looks pretty long.
I love that book. Huge.
It's huge.
Yeah,
it's
I
like,
read
what,
the
800
first
pages?
half. Yeah, I read the first half a few times. I mean, I've read it fully, I think 3 times, but there was a few times I just started and only got halfway through and then just stopped, and then
yeah.
I don't know.
So what would you say is it that draws you or attracts you to Stephen King's writing, Sin?
Okay, so I wrote a couple notes down. I'm going to look at that real quick. Okay, so just the way he paints the story. The devil is in the details, and he has a lot of details. And some people may say it's too much, but it gives the characters so much life and makes them memorable, and it makes them, you're able to differentiate between them. And I think I've noticed with some authors is that they'll have a bunch of characters, but they don't give them that life that helps you be able to kind of separate them out. And I don't get confused when there's a ton of different characters. Like even in Salem's Lot, there were so many different characters going on that I was never confused with like who they were talking about. But yeah, just the way he writes is every time I read it, I'm like, he's so good. Just he's a wordsmith. He paints with words.
Absolutely, yeah. I agree with you because his character work is it's like almost unmatched. They feel like real people every time, even the small characters. How about you, Jen? What attracts you to Stephen King's writing?
very similar to what you and Stan just talked about. The way that he writes characters, they feel so authentic, and the way sometimes that he can convey human emotion and experience with just a sentence, it pulls me in every time. He is a comfort read for me. I go back to him often when I'm having a hard time. Of course, I read him just for fun, but if I'm struggling, if I get in a reading slump, I can pick up something of his and I can be, right back in that world and be propelled to keep going page after page. And I just feel that he has a gift in that area that no other writer has ever come close to for me.
Michael, do you read Stephen King for comfort at all?
I do. I'm exactly like that, Jen. The first half of The Stand, and I read Carrie a lot and Misery. Like when I'm in a slump, it's kind of counterintuitive, but I read Misery, and it's just the work, the story, how well he writes it, that it buoys me up and also makes me want to write right away. So
it does, yeah. That brings up, I might add this to my canon of questions, because I noticed while listening to a lot of podcasts, a lot of people listen to King for comfort. So do you have any books, Jen, that you go to like to reread if you're feeling really bad, or do you just pick up a new book by King?
My main comfort reads would be Carrie, Gerald's Game. I know, shocking, but it is just Jessie's confrontation with her past juxtaposed with her position there because of Gerald speaks to me on a personal level. And so that just gives me comfort in seeing her strength, and Dolores Claiborne but I can't always revisit it often again because of its, its size, but it is my favorite novel of King's of all time.
It is a great book, but it's so dark too, especially a lot of the kid parts.
Yeah.
There's so many dark things going on in there.
That makes me feel better. And I know that's weird, but it's like when I'm really sad, I want to watch a really deep, involved drama.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like that dark stuff. I'm a fucked up sponge.
You like it darker, right?
You like it. Oh, there you go. There you go. I have a gripe with that title, though, honestly, because it's called You Like It Darker, but it's not that incredibly dark. He's written much darker.
Full dark, no stars to me.
I was just about to say that.
Around.
Full dark, no stars is a grim freaking collection of novellas, and that should have been called You Like It Darker. Sin, do you read King for comfort at all?
I don't think I ever have. I don't even know if I have a comfort read. I guess I might say it's probably a Magica.
Okay.
I don't. Yeah,
you do read like cozy stuff for comfort too, right?
I do. I've read the Narnia Chronicles. I don't know. That's not really cozy, but that's something I've gone back to over and over and over again throughout my whole life.
Nice.
Those were magical.
They were. Voyage of the Dawn Treader is my favorite.
I love that one too.
Sweet.
It's a good one.
That's the one that I think some people say needs to go first, because that's where the wardrobe was built, right?
Yeah, I think so. Or was that? Yeah.
But it still makes sense because you go back and see how it was built. I don't know.
It's all crazy.
Chronicles of Narnia aside, sorry.
Yeah, no, it's all right. You know what, Michael? You know us. We always have these asides. Like,
I was told that this is very strict.
Well, I sent a format, but that's just a guideline, as I said. But we're very like kind of loose.
Okay, fuck it then.
It works for me.
But since I was talking to you, Sin, I'm going to ask this next one to you. Would you rather read only King novels or his shorter works for the rest of your life?
Novels. I like more stories. Yeah, nice. I'm more to the story than just.
You like the meat.
Story. I do, because I'd be sad if I couldn't one day reread The Dark Tower.
You're absolutely right. Yeah, absolutely. Jen, would you rather read only King novels or his shorter works for the rest of your life?
That's a tough question, but I
It is,
have to
isn't
go
it?
with novels like Sin because of what we've talked about, the way that he writes characters and the way that he just builds so much backstory, even into minor characters. You just need a novel to really get into that completely. And I would hate to only read his shorter stuff and never be able to be immersed, in the 1,000-page it again.
Yeah, that would be hard not to reread those. I'm planning on rereading it this year because of the Welcome to Derry show that's
Yes.
coming out.
Oh,
And I want to reread The Stand because of that anthology that's coming out later in the year.
oh
Hey,
yeah, that
why don't
sounds
you read
good.
Carrie?
Michael's always on my case because I haven't read Carrie.
Ever?
Phenomenal.
That's one of the ones I
Oh,
haven't read.
And you
I'm
give
going
me
to
a
read it.
hard
You know what?
time for you like it darker.
I'm going to read Carrie this year. I say
I
it here.
bought you a copy.
You
it's
did.
short.
It's like
It
I
right,
mean, for a
short,
king
yeah.
work, it's
you
short.
can't see it, but it's right there. And
Oh, I'm sorry I Carrie shamed you again.
the Carrie shame, I can't handle it. No, I'm going to read it this year. I promise. It's a short book. I don't know why I haven't read it yet. All right. Last question before we dig into the story. Jen, do you have a favorite short story or novella by King?
I have 3 favorite short stories.
Nice.
My first one is from different seasons, and it is The Breathing Method. I feel like enough people don't talk about that one. I love that one. And the other 2 I want to talk about are Sorry, Michael. They're from You Like It Darker. And one of them is Rattlesnakes because I have
Oh
a
yeah.
deep love for Cujo.
Yeah.
Cujo made me cry, but Rattlesnakes made me just sob and bawl my eyes out for hours. And the other favorite I have is also from You Like It Darker, and it is On Slide In Road
Oh, I love
because I
that.
love the nod to Flannery O'Connor and the Southern Gothic. If you all couldn't tell, don't hold it against me, but I'm in Alabama. So, yeah, Southern Gothic, I get it.
See, I haven't read those stories because I didn't get that far.
I read
Oh,
that
Rattlesnakes is awesome.
Yeah.
Mhm.
I read that Flannery O'Connor story soon after reading You Like It Darker. And
Mhm.
it's very similar and yet so different. And
Mhm.
it's actually more disturbing. It's so
Yeah.
much more disturbing, especially when they go into the woods. You know what I'm talking about.
Yes.
And you hear the crack, it's like, oh my
Yeah.
God. What the
Yeah. Southern Gothic usually holds pulls no punches. It's out there.
Yeah. Sin, do you have a favorite short story or novella by King?
So mine was that Danny Coughlin's Bad Dream. Just I really haven't read that much of his short stories. So You Like It Darker, and back in the day I read Half 4 Past Midnight, but I don't remember any of those because it was so long ago. And then I Night Shift I've never read either, and so I'm digging into that because obviously why we're here today.
A funny story last week when Michael and I were talking, this question of course came up, but before that Michael was saying how he doesn't really like Denny Coughlin and all that, and then this question comes up and I was like, well, one of my favorite short story or novellas is Denny Coughlin's Nightmare, and Michael's like, oh no.
He's out of here. He's like, I'm out of here, guys.
Oh, no. It gave me a good laugh though. All right, so I guess we can nobody picked Jerusalem's Lot as their favorite, like I'm just joking. But yeah, Jerusalem's Lot, this is what we're discussing. This is what we're here to discuss. And this story is really interesting. I'm just going to repeat some of the information. Jerusalem's Lot was first published in 1978 collection, Night Shift, King's first short story collection. And it's original to that collection. And it's somewhat a prequel to Salem's Lot. So I asked Jen if she would synopsize the story for us. So please take it away, Jen.
All right. So Jerusalem's Lot is written in epistolary format, And it really draws on both the Gothic and Lovecraftian genres and combines folk horror and Gothic horror. And it follows our main character, Charles Boone, who in 1850 inherits an ancestral family home called Chapelwaite. And Chapelwaite is located near the abandoned town of Jerusalem's Lot in, guess where? Maine.
Always
and so, yes. He is very intrigued by the town's mysterious past and by the reactions to the local residents to the fact that his last name is Boone and he is dwelling in this Chapelwaite. He has an assistant by the name of Calvin, and they really began to investigate this Jerusalem's Lot. And they found out that at one point it was a thriving community, but for some reason it was abandoned in the late 18th century, and its inhabitants disappear without a trace. And the town's history is shrouded in secrets, witchcraft, incest, all that good stuff. And as Charles and Calvin kind of dive deeper into the mystery, they uncover this truth that the town once housed a monstrous entity. And this entity was worshipped by a cult, and there's a forbidden book of knowledge, and there is this worm, right? The decaying, the creepy worm, and the story ends in disaster for both Calvin and Charles. I don't know if we're giving spoilers, but
no, totally spoilers. Yeah, they're short stories. I should preface this to the audience. Go read these short stories and then come back and join us. It's much better if you've read the story. Sorry, I interrupted you.
No, that's fine. I just wanted to make sure. Calvin dies, as is usually the case. Like in Lovecraftian stories, the sidekick often gets the first brunt of the hit. Yeah. And then our main character, Charles, ends up going mad, and he believes he's the last of the family line. So the curse should end with him. But we find out there's like a second cousin twice removed who has the same last name and who ends up in the same house hearing the same weird noises. And so we really kind of find out there's no escaping fate or this family curse.
Awesome. Thank you so much. One reason why I asked somebody else to synopsize the stories is because I absolutely suck at doing that. I don't know why, but it's like a weakness I guess writers have of synopsizing stories.
That was a fantastic, like, you got every
bullet
point on there. Like,
I had a hard
really
time with it too.
Go on, please.
Yeah,
I feel like I say too much. Like I feel like a lot of that too is like grad school burnout. I'm like, but I don't know how to summarize everything. Is just like, but
No,
yeah,
that
I
was
hope
excellent.
I didn't let y'all down.
No, and don't worry
That was
about
really
saying too
good.
much. Here on any podcast that I do, rambling, talking, going off on tangents, or just talking for a long time, that's all very welcome.
That's
love
why
it.
I get invited.
Oh, so let's start here at the beginning, the very beginning, even before the story is written technically, because this is technically a prequel to Salem's Lot, but I'm a little confused about that because there's almost no connection to the novel itself. Am I blind here, or did anyone else connect?
Here's what I think is the connection. I think it's a place of evil and power, and like attracts like, and evil is attracted to evil. So it's almost like there's like a vortex or some sort of portal that's like either bringing out or pulling in these evil presences. And so that just, it's the evil spawning more evil, and that has drawn these whatever kind of forces to that area. And it seems like also there's just this cycle every so many years, the Salem's Lot disappears.
Yeah.
Something happens and everybody goes away again, and then it repeats itself.
Does anyone remember a really creepy church or anything like that in Salem's Lot? I mean, Barlow House, that was like a thing, but I don't remember like a creepy church.
No, because all you had was Father Callahan.
Yeah.
And was that the church that was maybe, was it on the same grounds? I don't know.
Michael, do you know of any like concrete connections here between?
I remember that there was, but when I read this again, I felt the same way. That because it's been a few years since I've read Salem's Lot again. But is that the one with Marsden House?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I said Barlow House.
I was totally getting Marsden House and the Haunting of Hill House mixed up because there was Hugh Crane that built Hill House, but so I mean, there's Chapelwaite in this, but it's Marsden House. Was that built on the site of?
That's what I'm thinking. Yeah.
I don't know.
Because that's got the connection somewhat there, because there's the mention of the cellar being something creepy, and you have the cellar in the Marsden House too. And then this may be like stretching it a little bit, but James Boone, who was Philip maybe was the one that hung himself, right? After his daughter died falling down the stairs. But if you remember in Salem's Lot, Ben Mears as a child goes into the Marsden house and sees Hubie Marston hanging there, like the ghost of Hubie Marston. So I noticed that connection between, some character hanging themselves and leaving that kind of imprint on the past. And then there was also like metaphors and sometimes outright use of the word, like vampire and Nosferatu in this, or short story. So I kind of put those connections there too. But I also think a lot of it is what Sin said about the idea that this place houses evil, and that would have been what drew Barlow to come to that spot of all the places he could go.
Yeah, it's kind of incredible to me that people would rebuild after, the town, the nearby town where Chapelwaite is. Everyone is very afraid of Jerusalem's Lot. If you even think about going there, they're like, back off.
Right.
This story is kind of, it's like a love child, I think, of Dracula, Bram Stoker's Dracula.
Because Dracula's an epistolary as well.
Absolutely.
So I like that about Jerusalem.
Yeah, but it's like a love child between Dracula and like something by H.P. Lovecraft. I can't pin it down. But it's very Lovecraftian. It's like if
it is.
Yeah, especially with the whatever the Yog Soggoth or whatever the mythical thing under the church was.
Yeah.
It's very much like the Dunwich Horror, which I re-listened to, or partially listened and partially read it because I knew it was connected to that. But it's almost like it's not exactly a pastiche, but kind of, because the Dunwich Horror, like I took these little notes, it has like a mention of that noxious odor, like we keep hearing in Jerusalem's Lot, the appearance of this village or town that looks very eerie and uncanny. You have inbreeding in the Dunwich Horror also. And Yog Sothoth is like the Lovecraftian, but I think in this short story, King kind of changed it. It was like Yog Soggoth or something. So it's similar, but maybe a little bit different. But yeah, it definitely reminded me a whole lot of the Dunwich Horror.
Yeah, totally. Like that's what I put in my notes. I was like, I think without having reread the Dunwich Horror in a couple of years, I was going to reread it because that's the one that rings the bell the most for me. I was like, I should reread that, but I couldn't make it happen. But yeah, it's also in the language. The language is so completely Lovecraftian. I heard Stephen King talk recently in the King Cast. He was on the King Cast as a guest, and he was saying that he can mimic certain writers, and Lovecraft was one of the ones he named off. And then I went and read this story, and it was like, yeah, he totally can.
Have we all read Crouch End?
Yeah, I've read that short story. It's in the Nightmares and Dreamscapes collection. If you like Lovecraftian type horror, this one isn't the same as Jerusalem's Lot. It's about a couple that go over to London, I believe it is, and
it's very much a pastiche. It's
very Lovecraftian, yeah. And it's a total ode, you can tell. Yeah. All right. So, how familiar are you, Sin, with Lovecraft? Have you read much of him, or?
Nope. I mean, I've read. I think I read the Dunwich Horror like a million years ago, but outside of that, I have read almost zilch.
Yeah.
Zero zip.
Well, we should put a note here that I think we're all well aware of the problems, how Lovecraft is problematic, and not everybody wants to go read him, and that's perfectly fine. I went and read all his short stories except for maybe one or two about 15, 20 years ago. And while I was doing that, I was listening to this podcast called the Literary H.P. Lovecraft cast or podcast or something like that, where they went through all the stories. And that's how I learned how much of a racist piece of crap this guy is. And so I think that's like a footnote that everyone kind of puts there to say we're not saying Lovecraft is great or anything, but but he has influenced a lot of horror, and he was a big influence on Stephen King as well. So how familiar are you with Lovecraft, Jen?
Quite familiar. I do teach some classes on Lovecraft, but always lead with what we just talked about with, just how extreme his views were, racism, xenophobia. But so I'm pretty familiar with him.
Yeah. The funny thing about his racism is that he was against like all other races, including Jewish people, and yet he married a Jewish person. It's like he was completely blind to the crap that spewed from his mouth. Michael, have you read much of Lovecraft?
Yeah, but my memory, and it can really not contain all the elder gods. But my first Lovecraft story was The Rats in the Walls.
Yes.
Which is why I wrote the bit about that in Plank Children. Also because I lived in a place with rats in the walls. But so I kind of like Lovecraft's other stuff just as much.
Yeah, me too. I'm actually almost a bigger fan of his other stuff than, like the Cthulhu mythos.
Yeah.
But, this story reminds me a lot of Rats in the Walls too, because of the rats in the walls. But we find out later are not actually rats. I like how Calvin's going around.
That up to us, he doesn't say it, but we can.
No, you kind of get the idea, but there's like hints. Because Calvin, he's like looking for these rats. He's setting up traps, and he's like, we hear all this. The rats are in the walls, man. I can hear them, but there's no holes in the walls anywhere, and there's no droppings. So where are they exactly? That's great. Poor Calvin. I loved Calvin. He's such a good little guy.
Fodder for the evil. That's all they are.
Yeah.
That's like you said. The sidekicks get it.
Right.
The sidekicks always get it. What is
Calvin?
My
God, that's me.
Watch yourself, Michael. Put mirrors in front of you, Michael. You have to watch your back. I would never hurt Michael. He's one of my best friends. Where was I gonna go? Oh yeah, Calvin. What exactly is Calvin? I assumed he was a servant, right?
Servant, assistant.
Yeah.
Kind of like how Barlow had an assistant, but
I'm pretty sure it would be servant though, because it's like 1850 , right? So I don't think assistants. It's like
or like a valet or a valet.
Yeah.
Kind of.
Yeah. Okay. Because he's very, very dedicated to Charles Boone, but you can tell it's kind of a professional too. Like he but everyone's worried about Charles because his wife recently died, and he suffered from some sort of illness that's kind of mysterious. But I kind of looked into it a little bit. There is a mention of what it is. The illness was called a brain fever, and so I looked it up. Brain fever in the old times, like 1800s, was it's an outdated medical term that was used as a synonym for frenzy, which is basically going insane. It comes with like a fever and everything too. So what did did everyone else get confused by like, because everyone's like, oh, watching him, making sure that he's okay, and everyone's worried about Charles's health.
Well, I've read so much where people have brain fever. So, I'm like, oh, there's the proverbial and ubiquitous brain fever. So
It seemed like, Boone is the rich guy, and he's all like, oh, I can't do it, right? But the servant, he's in the trenches. He's
I'll do it
keeping
for
the
you.
yeah. So
I'll fall on your sword.
every
Right.
little thing that happens, Charles is like freaking out, like, I can't do this. I'm in the Lovecraft story. I'm gonna go insane. And but there's Calvin. He's like, don't worry, sir. I've got your back. I'll
Yeah.
take care of you. I kind of need someone like that.
Don't we all?
Yeah.
That's what my kitty is. That's what Lizzie is. Aren't you?
Aw.
That's what cats are for. Yes.
Yes.
Oh, what?
She's got my back so much she's not even here.
Same with mine. He's probably taking a nap right now.
Yeah, my cat
Yeah.
is downstairs sleeping.
Somewhere mine's around, I guess.
So the relationship between Charles and Calvin, do you think their dynamic drove the plot forward at all?
Yes. I mean, it was a big part of it because I don't know.
Yeah, because
I don't know
Boone,
where I was gonna go with that.
Calvin finds that map in the attic, right?
Yeah.
And just like
Yeah.
a couple of kids, they're like looking at the map and they're, what's this? There's Jerusalem's Lot. What's that? Oh, it's an abandoned town.
In
And like,
the writing of it, I felt like Calvin served as a sounding board so that he wasn't just like thinking to himself and he could.
yeah,
Is
but
this something I don't
both of them were quite ready to go investigate right away once they saw that map, right?
Yeah.
What do you think, Jen?
Yeah, I think they did, drive it forward by the relationship they had and the way that Calvin was initially all gung-ho to, hey, yeah, let's go do this. But, eventually Calvin didn't want to go back. He was trying to protect Charles and, but at the same time, he couldn't let Charles go alone. So he was willing to go back to the place in order to try to protect his, master. I don't know if that's the right word or not, but
Yeah, his
Yeah, he never gives us really any term or.
Yeah, well, to me it seemed like they were both eager to go the first time, but then
Yeah.
when Charles is like, I have to go back, Calvin's like, you sure you want to do that? Don't you remember the last
Blame it
time?
on brain fever.
Yeah, and you slept
Calvin
for
didn't
like,
have the brain fever, but that guy did. So he was like, I need to go. I don't know.
it's like, dude, you slept for 36 hours straight after that first time. Yeah, there's the setting, like Chapelwaite itself is pretty creepy, don't you think? The house.
mhm.
I mean,
And with
it's
all
got,
the portraits.
yeah, all those
looking
weird
at it.
portraits, the rats in the walls that aren't rats, as we later learn.
Yep.
There's journals that Calvin, of course,
Oh,
the
written in
journals are written
code.
in code. Yeah, and Calvin figures it out pretty quickly.
Yeah, he was like
overnight.
the what would you call it? He was digging into the everything while the owner of the house is just kind of like, I want to do this, but not really digging into the historical details or anything. Like Calvin was like doing all the legwork of trying to actually get to the heart of like what is actually here and what's going on. So maybe that's why he realized it more and didn't want to go back the second time because he's like, there's some evilness or something going on that's bad news to go back there.
Yeah, absolutely. But Chapelwaite's kind of creepy itself, but it gets a lot worse when we get
Yeah,
to
don't go in the
Jerusalem's Lot.
basement.
Oh yeah, the
Ew.
basement. You're right. Yeah.
Basement
You
cellar,
remember
whatever. The
uh,
big rats are down there.
the big rats? Yeah, human-sized rats, right?
Yeah, the human-sized ones. Yep.
With the chair and the noose, that was just so vivid in my
Mhm.
Yeah.
mind.
Yeah. That's and then what they see soon after that they see the rope burns on that
Yeah.
on that face on the neck of that face that's in the wall or the doorway. Sorry. Yeah. But that they go to Jerusalem's lot. I like when they first go to Jerusalem's lot. I'm going to attempt to read a passage here from when they, not when they get to town, but when they first enter the church. I hope this is the right page. In the glimmering half-light of afternoon, the pews stretched ghost-like to the altar. Above them was a high oaken pulpit with a shadow-struck narthex from which gold glimmered. With a half sob, Calvin that devoured that with a half sob, Calvin, that devout Protestant, made the holy sign, and I followed suit, for the gold was large, beautifully wrought cross, but it was hung upside down, symbol of Satan's mass. We must be calm, I heard myself saying. We must be calm, Calvin. We must be calm. But a shadow had touched my heart, and I was afraid as I had never been. I have walked beneath death's umbrella and thought there were none darker, but there is. We walked down the aisle, our footfalls echoing above and around us. We left tracks in the dust, and at the altar there were other tenebrous objects, the art. I cannot let my mind dwell upon them. I began to mount the pulpit itself. Don't, Mr. Boone, Cal cried suddenly. I'm afraid. I just love that entrance, and I love the little details, like we left tracks in the dust. Things like that. It's things that you notice when you. I think that's how King makes us relate to characters so much, is that they notice all the small things that we notice. But I don't know how he captures it so well.
Yes.
I think, when he talks about like skull cinema, and he talks about getting into the page, I see him as a writer that can do that so easily. When you're in that zone and you're not writing it, but you're actually in where it is, and you're just like writing out a report of what you see. So that's what I think about with King, because he's there and he's like, oh yeah, footprints in the dust. So
yeah, I like that. Yeah. So there's rats in the walls here too, and they growl.
It's a Yuba City truck.
That was really neat, because that was a truck, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, that sound didn't sound like a truck at first. It was like,
I know.
Timing,
I feel I live with that.
Yeah, I don't know how you do that, but that's all right. Yeah,
they say it's the truck, but I don't think so.
Oh my God. So I want to talk a little bit about generational trauma, because this, I think, has a strong theme of that I don't even know if King meant for that exactly. So I don't think back in 1970 something, when he wrote this story, I don't think generational trauma was a thing, but it's definitely there. Blood calls to blood, right? What do you think about that, Jen?
I think that's like one of the heavy Gothic elements I picked up on, is that family curse, and just that inescapable family curse that it will get passed down. And also the past haunting the present, which is a big part of the Gothic, because everything that happened in the past is still affecting this family. So I definitely think it leaned into generational trauma, even though, like you said, they may not have had the terminology for it. King was, he was going somewhere with that, ahead of his time, we might say.
Yeah, it's not the first thing King's been ahead of his time for. He's done that a lot. Would you there's one thing that I like that this calls to, is the very end, when Charles's is it his cousin or something? When Charles finishes this off, he's like, I don't have any relatives. Right. This curse ends with me.
Oh.
But then one of his cousins or something that he didn't know he had picks up this book, and he's like, yeah, none of that happened.
Charles Boone's second cousin removed by 3 generations.
Yes, there it is. But what happens? He goes to the house, and because I guess he's automatically inheriting it, and he's got a rat in the wall problem.
And you notice his first name is James, just like the actual like cult ancient leader guy. This this one at the end has the same name. So I felt like that was almost like right on the nose, like you thought you were getting away.
Absolutely, yeah.
But you can't.
Nope.
Another thing that's interesting too is the different spelling of the last name Boone, because
Oh yeah.
you had like did they add the E? They added the E, didn't they? Whereas the original that they thought must be related to them who started the cult, he didn't have an E, and then the family added the E. So you have to wonder if that was like trying to distance themselves from that ancient cult and story by changing their name, adding an E, because Nathaniel Hawthorne, real life person, actually did something similar. He put the W in Hawthorne, whereas his actual name was, I guess it was Hathorne. I don't know how you say it without the W, but he wanted to distance himself from his family's dark past because his great great grandfather was one of the key judges in the Salem witch trials.
Wow.
So because he, was an English teacher and major, I have to wonder if he was kind of drawing a little bit on that source, another Gothic writer, kind of, trying to take that idea of changing your name to distance yourself. But in this case, of course, as we just talked about, they couldn't get away from it.
Yeah, that's fascinating. I'm curious to know more about the your Gothic notes that you took in the story, Jerusalem's Lot. What were the Gothic points? I mean, there's a lot, but I just want to know from your perspective.
Okay. Let's see. One of the things that you often find in the Gothic is the idea of incest. That is quite often in Gothic. And so we get that here. Also, that sense of decay, like at the very beginning, whenever he's describing the house, like you talked about, it's got that very eerie feeling. Like you could tell at one time it was very luxurious. And one thing that Gothic does is lean into the idea of decadence, where it's overdone, where the wealthy really overdo their wealth, and then it ends up decaying. So you have that rotting away of what was once beautiful. And then also a lot of omens and portents. Like there was frequent mention of whippoorwills, which is also in the Dunwich Horror, but in a lot of folklore, whippoorwills are thought to be death omens, or are thought to be beings that are present to transport the souls of the living when they die, to transport them to the afterworld. Again, the whole idea of family curses and the uncanny appearance of Jerusalem's Lot and the church, whereas even though it was old and abandoned, it still looked almost new, like it hadn't been touched. So all of those were some of the Gothic elements. There are probably more, but I don't want to take forever talking about them.
Oh, I don't mind, honestly. Go right ahead if you have more. I'm sure nobody else minds.
Let's see. I have like probably a few more now, of course, trying to flip through and look at all of it. There's one quote here, and it's really kind of like back to back Gothic and cosmic. So this is the quote. There has been an evil breath in the air since you took up residence. In the last week, since you set foot in the accursed place, there have been omens and portents, a call over the face of the moon, flocks of whippoorwills which roost in the cemeteries, an unnatural birth. You must leave. And that was, I guess, like the housekeeper speaking to Charles. Yeah. Mrs. Chorus. Yeah. And then he tries to pass it off and say, oh, those are just dreams. And then it immediately switches to a Gothic. And then he says, oh, those are just dreams. And then it immediately switches to a Gothic. And then he says, oh, those are just dreams. And then it immediately switches to a Gothic. And then he says, oh, those are just dreams. And then it immediately switches to a Gothic. And then he says, oh, those are just dreams. And then it immediately switches to a Gothic. And then he says, oh, those are just dreams. And then it immediately switches to a Gothic. And then he says, oh, those are just dreams. And then it immediately switches to a Gothic. And then he says, oh, those are just dreams. And then it immediately switches to a Gothic. And then he says, oh, those are just dreams. And then it immediately switches to a Gothic. And then he says, oh, those are just dreams. And then it immediately switches to a Gothic. And then he says, oh, those are just dreams. And then it immediately switches to a Gothic. And then he says, oh, those are just dreams or a cosmic element, because she says, is it a dream that Barbara Brown gave birth to a child with no eyes, or that Clifton Brockett found a flat press trail 5 feet wide in the woods beyond Chapel Waite, where all had withered and gone white? And can you, who have visited Jerusalem's lot, say with truth that nothing still lives there? So he really connects that Gothic idea of omens, importance, and cursed family with the cosmic, this idea that there's something bigger out there controlling you, that, you know, all of us are just little minute specks, and there's something bigger and greater out there moving us forward no matter what we try to do. So I just like the way he could take the Gothic and cosmic and blend them seamlessly.
Absolutely awesome. Thank you so much. Yeah, so I don't think there's too much more we can discuss about this story. I think we've hit all the. I'm a little sad we didn't talk about the cleaners very much, because they added an interest, or at least the main cleaner. What was her name? Cloris. Yeah, she. I just love. She was like the gas station attendant for slasher movies, that warns you away, like, you know, you don't want to go camping in this area.
It reminded me a lot of his friend Peter Straub's If You Could See Me Now. I don't know if you folks have read that. I love that. And he has a lady come over to, like, she took care of the place. And was it? I think it was that book, but she tells him that she's not going to stay there after dark. And she's like, after dark, when you're all alone in the dark. just like Cloris, it was, you know, that warning, you know, I'm not staying here when you're alone in the dark.
In the dark. And it's dark. And it's night. Yeah, I like that. Yeah. So Sin, did you notice, like, you've read a fair amount of King, right?
I have, yes.
Did you notice, like, this is fairly early in King's writing career, but did you notice any King motifs or themes that he typically does? Like, there's one I noticed, like, we've spoiled the whole story, so Calvin does die, but Stephen King lets us know that he's gonna die before he dies. That's a huge,
he does. Yeah, he does do that often.
Yeah, it's like
oh, go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say, yeah, and he never saw Timmy again. He never saw Timmy alive again. That type of thing. Yeah.
He's like the best at doing that, because otherwise it's like, well, you just told me what's gonna happen.
Yeah,
I like when King does that. And sometimes he'll do that, and it's like, it's because the other guy dies, not that Timmy dies. It's the other way around.
Yeah, I didn't, outside of that, I don't think I really noticed, at least that I can think of, any of his, like, King-isms or his signature motifs or, like, stuff that he always does in that one, because it really had a different vibe to it with just the way it was written, how it was written through letters. So
yeah, it was very different.
There's rats in the walls. Fire and save matches.
Yeah, that's one reason why.
Main accent. I don't know what that was. That's how they talk in Maine, just like that.
Oh yeah. No, the reason why I asked that is because this story is very different from other King stories, because of the whole Lovecraftian angle and Dracula, because it's very Dracula too. There's a strong connection, like, with the village and Chapel Waite, when they're like, you know, the village people are like, don't go to Jerusalem's lot, and when he does go, they turn on him. It's very similar in what happens to Jonathan Harker when he goes to visit Dracula, and they're like, don't go there. If you go there, you know, you're not going to have our help at all. So how about we get into what we liked and what we didn't like about this story? Sin, what did you like most about this story?
I like that it kind of gave an origin story as to why Salem's Lot was the way it was, like that there was always, like, this, or where the evil presence came from and who kind of kicked it off, and just seeing kind of a sort of backstory of why it was so evil.
Mm-hmm.
I think I would have liked, what I didn't like is I think maybe I would have liked more connections to the full novel of it than there was. But I know there's another short story too. Isn't there
Oh,
another
there's a few, yeah. I think, or no, there's
related to
in
Salem's Lot?
this collection. I think there's another Salem's Lot story.
Is it in this collection? I didn't know if it was in this collection or not. I thought there was one more story that's, I don't remember
I
what
can't
it's
remember if
called,
it's
but
in this
that
collection
might
either.
be.
I've been so focused on this one. Is it? No, it's not
So
that one.
let's see. I'm gonna go on the internet here.
Is it? No, it's not One for the Road.
Let's see.
I forgot the long
One for it is One for the Road.
it?
It says
Okay.
it acts as a sequel to King's 1975 novel, Salem's Lot, and also connected to the story of Jerusalem's Lot. Is that in there? One for the Road?
Yep.
Yep.
Oh, okay, so then it is in this one.
Awesome.
Does that mean we should do that one too?
Oh, well, I'm covering them all, so
You're covering them all.
I'm covering them all. So, Jen, what's your most favorite part of this short story and least favorite?
I like the way that he blended gothic and cosmic horror into this story, and I like also that this story is about going somewhere forbidden and entering. Like, there's one part where it's an interesting choice of words whenever they go to Jerusalem's Lot and they go into that chapel or that church. Instead of just saying I opened the door, it says I opened the portal.
Mm.
And I was kind of like, okay, so that's almost reminded me of being in that forbidden place. And then he says, the smell of rot and decay, which smote us, was nearly palpable. There are spiritually noxious places, buildings where the milk of the cosmos has become sour and rancid. The church is such a place. And as soon as I saw that word portal and sour, I thought about Pet Cemetery, maybe because that was my first movie and book. But, you know,
the earth is
the
sour.
ground is sour. Yeah. And I was like, okay, that idea of a place that's supposed to be a resting place for the dead or a holy place is now instead sour. And then on like the next page from the passage you just read, he talks about I have walked beneath death's umbrella and thought there was none darker, but there is. So that idea of something being darker than death made me go back to the, cliche, sometimes dead is better.
Yeah.
So I kind of made that connection there between the ground being sour and the idea that death is better, that he was kind of formulating, some early thoughts maybe that he went into deeper with Pet Cemetery. So I really liked everything about this story. I did give it 5 stars. I don't really think there was anything I didn't like about this one.
Yeah. I really like you making connections there to other stories because that all went over my head. But now I see it clearly. It's like, oh, totally, man. So thank you for that insight.
It's the kind of duality of, when you have a favorite writer and then you study him, sometimes it takes the fun out of it, but sometimes it's still fun.
Yeah. I don't know. I had a lot of fun like trying to dissect this story. Because I've never done it before, and I really wanted to have like a podcast where I dissect stuff, and so this is like my first attempt too. So I should have maybe mentioned that earlier. So, Michael, what did you like and not like about this?
I'm not the biggest fan of epistolaries. It's just, I don't know, the letters back and forth. Once I get into that, I really like it. The same thing with Dracula and Jerusalem's Lot. But the best was just the steady dread. A lot of what you said, Jen. And just when the worm comes out, that's just one of the best like monsters that I think King has ever like just condensed into that one little coming up from the hole in the pulpit and kind of slams back down. It just really, I don't know, that really hit me.
Did you read the story and you like it darker that has a similar thing happen or no?
No.
There's
I'm
a
gonna pick that up
Lovecraftian
after this,
story.
anyway. Okay.
I forget which one it's called,
Is
but
it
it's
Dreams? Is that what it's called?
It's the dreaming one, yeah.
Dreams
yeah,
something?
yeah. It's
I can't
got
remember
a
the
vibe
title.
like that. It's
I
creepy
stopped
and weird.
after Danny Coughlin, so I haven't read any
Okay.
past that. But I hear you mentioned rattlesnakes, and I hear that's really good.
Yeah, I mentioned that to you last week too.
Okay, that was you.
If you like Cujo, did you like Cujo?
Oh, I love that book.
It's a sequel. It takes place like 40 years later, but it's a continuation, and it's very sad, but it's also very horrifying in parts, like and disturbing. I think you'd like it.
Super
Honestly.
creepy.
It's
Yeah.
super creepy. Yeah.
I'm gonna read that. Right after these.
Yeah. My favorites and my dislikes of this story. I kind of went smartass route with this. I liked that it has a Lovecraftian feel to it. What I didn't like was the Lovecraftian writing style. I'm not a hater of Lovecraftian's writing style, but it can get to be a bit much sometimes. And I read this story about 3 times, and after like when I was in the middle of doing that, I was just like, oh god, why couldn't you have just written this a bit, normally instead of trying to pin down Lovecraft style. Like
I caught that at one point that became very obvious to me.
Yeah.
And then I
it was obvious to me from
and then went past, but
I read the first page and I'm like, oh, he's doing Lovecraft here. Like, all right. At first I was right into it. I was like, yay, I'm reading a Lovecraft story because it felt almost exactly the same. And then after a while, it's just like, why? All right, so we're gonna, I guess, wrap things up here. Before we do completely, though, I'm just wondering, this story has technically been adapted into a TV series called Chapelwaite. Has anyone here watched this?
I was going to ask because I know that there was actually thought it was a movie, but yeah, I knew there was something out there, and I've been wondering that since I read that. So no, I haven't.
Neither have I.
No.
I don't watch too much TV, but I want to watch this
Same.
show. Yeah, so none of us have watched it. Well, that's fine. But yeah, did you guys know that this existed? And it was basically no.
I knew it did, but I haven't gotten around to watching it yet because this was my first time to read the story. So now that I've read the story, maybe I'll watch this show.
Yeah, I went and actually bought the first season 2 weeks ago, and I still haven't watched any of it. It was only like
for a new show,
only $20.
So maybe that will be it.
But yeah, I don't know if it's any good, but I wanted to watch it for this episode just to have some insight. But there you have it. Adult life styles get in the way of work and children and all that stuff.
Yes, indeed.
Oh, that was really creepy. When I think it was when Charles went to Thompson, the wood guy, was when those kids came out, one with no eyes and one with no nose.
Yeah.
Oh, because in a part that was read was the thing about kids not having eyes, but when we actually see her and then the one without the nose, that was a great image.
There was a lot of great imagery in this story though. Like he just pulled it out,
Yeah,
he was going nuts, and I think you could tell Stephen King was having a lot of fun writing this. He really enjoyed dabbling in Lovecraftian style and imagery, and he nailed it too. All right, any last thoughts, Sin? Final thoughts?
I think my final thoughts was like my favorite parts of all the imagery was that going into the church and everything that happened at the church. I thought that was like the coolest, and just I could see it, like see what was happening as he described it. I thought that was pretty awesome.
Yeah, me too. That's honestly, that's like one of my favorite parts. I absolutely adore that part. Jen, do you have any final thoughts on this story?
I just enjoyed it. I liked, like I said, the gothic cosmic element, and just the way that it starts very simply and then it ends, with that little gut punch at the end. Like, oh, you thought you ended this? Guess what? You didn't.
Yeah. Michael, final thoughts.
Final thoughts? I will read You Like It Darker.
Yeah.
He'll finish it one day.
That's it. That's my final thought. Oh,
We're all waiting
just
here.
like
Come on,
you
Michael.
said, I mean, this is King having fun. And, so early on, you see, the traces of things that are going to keep going for decades in his work, just,
Yeah.
and like the descriptions. I think that was, you, Sin, talked a lot about the details and just all of that. That's what makes King great for me. And you see that right away, all in these, all the stories in this book,
Absolutely. All right. Well, I want to thank everyone so much for coming on and helping me get this thing going. Sin, thank you for all your hard work with the Dark Tower series when we covered that and talking about it with me. Thank you, Jen, for coming on and giving us that awesome insight into the gothic nature of this short story. And Michael, thank you for being a good friend and tagging along and making it fun. And with your insights too, of course.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
Before we go, though, just to repeat, where can people find you, Sin, online?
I am on YouTube at Sin's Book Nook, and then Blue Sky, which is the simply Sin. Sin is SYN. I'm on Instagram under that same name, but I don't know how long I'm gonna stay on Instagram. So
yeah, I kind of get the same feeling. Jen,
where
can people find
me? Yeah, YouTube, Instagram, Threads, and Blue Sky. Literary Love 123.
And Michael, where can people find you? In case they want to, bug you about You Like It Darker.
I think my website, Michael Schutz Fiction, has links to everything except maybe my Instagram, which is just Schutz Fiction.
Awesome. All right. Well, thanks everyone. And I just want to say, I don't know what I was going to say. I guess, if you want to join the Patreon, to people who are listening, you can do so easily. Just go to the show notes, and there are several different tiers there. And one is Stephen King exclusive. And if you want to email us your own ideas on Jerusalem's Lot or any Stephen King short story for that matter, you can email me at shortbiteskpod@gmail.com. And until next time, everyone, be safe, be kind, and most importantly, stay weird. And Michael?
Stay dark, my friends.
Stay dark. All right.